Morning everyone. This video lesson is about analysing the poem Ozymandias by Percy Shelley. So what we're going to do in this session is to explore the presentation of power and conflict in Ozymandias. We're going to explore a range of poetic techniques within the poem, and we're going to mainly confidently annotate the poem. That should be the main task that we're doing in this session. To do this, you'll need a copy of the poem Ozymandias. I've included a link to a copy of it in the description of the video, and a pen and paper or access to a Word document. I've just put in the top right hand corner a little quotation there from the former Roman Emperor Caligula: "Let them hate so long as they fear," just to remind you of the sort of person we see Ozymandias to be in the poem. Now let's start by seeing what we can remember from the last video. There were three key quotations we looked at in a little bit of detail in the last video, and let's see if we can recall what they were. So I've given you a bit of a hand here. I've put the quotations in for you with a few missing words. So first thing I'd like to do is pause the video and see if you can remember what it is that should be in those three quotations. Right, so you should have had time to have a go at that. What you should have come up with is the sneer of cold command, again implying that Ozymandias is quite an austere, cruel sort of figure just by his face in the statue. The second one, "My name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair." And that's him saying he's the best of the kings, the top of the kings, and challenging God, ye mighty, to look on his works, his statue, and despair. So be afraid. He's challenging God to be afraid and intimidated of his statue. And right at the end of the poem, we've got the decay of that colossal wreck as the statue has crumbled down, which is a symbol that represents the lack of respect he gets from his people. And we came to the conclusion that that was because he was a cruel leader. That makes sense. If you're a cruel leader, you don't get the respect of your populace, you won't get remembered. So here's a copy of the poem. The useful thing about this poem is it's quite short, so it fits on one slide quite neatly. Again, looking back at the first video, we noticed that in terms of power, the poem is really just stating that Ozymandias was an incredibly powerful leader. It stated that Ozymandias maintained his power through fear and cruelty. So he wasn't a kind, benevolent leader that people respected and liked. He did it by being cruel and being feared. Again, let them hate so long as they fear. And finally, most importantly, his power has now crumbled, which I think we can link quite closely to that second bullet point there. If you maintain it through fear and cruelty, you're going to lose your power at the end of the day. People won't respect you. In terms of conflict, it's obviously a conflict between Ozymandias and his subjects. He's being cruel to them. They have to do what they're told, but they don't like it. There's the conflict between rulers and those who are ruled. And there's also a bit of a conflict about which might be the right way to rule. Should you rule through fear or should you rule through kindness and respect? Again, the analogy I tend to use here is if you're a Premier League football manager, or any football manager in fact, do you try and get the best out of your team by shouting at them, berating them, being tough, being that hard guy? Or do you do it by being kind and the softly approach and making them feel valued? The answer is probably somewhere in the middle. But it's an interesting debate. There's managers who've had success at either level. But again, this isn't a video about football. So what I'd like you to do is have a read through the poem. Now, those statements about power and conflict are true. They are evident in this poem. The important thing we have to do, as we mentioned in the previous video, is to show that we can pick out specifically in the poem where those statements about power and conflict are evident. So how you do this is up to you. You can do it by annotating it, you can do it by writing it down on a piece of paper, but can you find any words or phrases in the poem, including the ones we looked at on the last slide? Can you see any words or phrases that relate to the above statements about power and conflict? So I'd start by just taking one statement. So Ozymandias was powerful. Have a look. Can you find a quotation that supports it? Then go to the next one. He maintained it through fear and cruelty. Can you find something to support it? And so on. As a challenge option, if you want, you can decide your own interpretation of power or conflict. That's not an exhaustive list. think of another statement, and select a quotation to justify it. So pause the video, have a go at that for the next 5 or 10 minutes or so. So let's start with the annotation portion of this video lesson. I'm going to show you what I would annotate in this poem, and I'm just going to pick out what I think are the main, most important bits. There's other things that I won't say that you could refer to as well, and again, there's lots and lots of information online for you to find and look at your leisure, but this is just the basic. This is the important stuff, in my opinion. I couldn't talk about everything, it would take too long. So let's have a look at this. Have your poem ready. Get ready to annotate with what I'm about to show you and talk you through. I'll talk you through each of them. Obviously, if I go too fast, just pause the video. That's the beauty of video here. And you'll notice I've color coded the language features, the structural features, and the form features in 3 different boxes. If you want to mimic that, that's a good idea. But anyway, first thing I notice is in terms of the form, it's in third person, traveller from an antique land. And that for me makes it seem a bit more kind of mythical and spectacular, like, oh, there was this story once upon a time about this statue. It makes it seem a bit more like it's kind of etched into stone and it's more mythical here. Again, that adjective antique meaning the same thing as well. So an antique is valuable, it's ancient, it should be kind of preserved and studied. So it's like this is sort of ancient, this like an ancient tale of curiosity here. And if we then look at the next line, the statue has 2 vast and trunkless legs of stone. So the adjective trunkless, the trunk of a tree, is the most important bit of a tree. It's the middle bit. It's also probably the strongest. Right? I think, you know, it's thicker than the branches and the roots. So again, this statue is trunkless. It's lost its most important, most strong part. Again, kind of symbolic of his lack of power, like that missing the trunk from a tree. But also now this visage, this facial expression, has been shattered. If you shatter something, if you shatter, say, a glass or a glass bottle or something, then it's very difficult to put it back together. You haven't just broken it, you've shattered it into a million pieces, which means it's completely broken and won't come back, a bit like his power. Then you get a structural feature of a list. So half sunk, a shattered visage lies, whose frown and wrinkled lip and sneer of cold command. So the frown, the lip, and the sneer of cold command are all negative facial features which emphasize those negative qualities that he has. And if you list something, again, it adds that emphasis. It means there's not just one thing wrong with him, there's 1, 2, there's 3 things about his face that just suggest he's a nasty person. And they've listed it to really build that point in. And these negative features were stamped, that powerful word, stamped on his statue. So literally everything about this person, this character Ozymandias, was done with force. He dominated his populace by force. Even the guy carving his statue carved it with force, stamping them onto his face. Then you get the adjective lifeless. So in terms of power, this is where we talk about the power of objects. This statue is inanimate. It is without life. It's just a bunch of rock that's been shaped into something. But this bunch of rock actually has an awful lot of power, which shows how powerful objects and icons can be. Then we have finally on this bit the personification of the hand that mocked them. So just the hand of this statue is mocking them, like belittling them, making fun of them. Again, emphasizing that even this object holds this massive amount of power, and we don't like to think we can be controlled by objects, but clearly we can. Again, if you need to pause the video now to get that down in your own time, feel free. So for this section here, the first thing I want to talk about is the tone shifts in these last 6 lines. And on the pedestal, these words appear. My name is Ozymandias. That's a declarative sentence here. The tone becomes declarative. It kind of shows his arrogance. I am Ozymandias. I am the King of Kings. You know, he's stating things like they're facts and like, again, they are etched in stone. They are there for the whole world to hear, like it's the most important thing ever. And he repeats King of Kings, which shows, again, his arrogance, the arrogance of power, that he's in charge of all the kings. He's above all of them. He is literally the best of the best. And he uses in this most important sentence, look on my works, ye mighty, and despair. We know ye mighty is God, and he's not saying God, if you've got a minute, would you mind having a look at this nice statue that's been built of me? And also, if you've got time, be afraid he's saying, no, look on my works. You, God, you look at what I'm doing right now. He's giving God an order, which again shows he thinks he's better than God. Look at them, despair of them. And there's an interesting bit of capitalization there. The words works and mighty have capital letters when grammatically they shouldn't. Now, mighty is capitalized because it's God, so I'm guessing a bit of respect here, effectively. But the fact that works has a capital W, the works being the statue, suggests that this statue he sees as good as God. So he's saying he's so powerful that this inanimate object that he's ordered someone to build for him is the same as God. Same level on that line. You then get, in terms of a structural feature, after that big arrogant sentence, you just get a short sentence. Nothing beside remains. Full stop. That's the caesura. Caesura is when there's a full stop in the middle of a line here, or any kind of terminator. So exclamation mark, question mark, same thing. And they do that, I think, to emphasize that stillness. Nothing beside remains. Pause. So even though he's shouting at God, now there's a real stillness and silence around the statue site because there's no power there anymore. And that's also contrasted by the enjambment, which is when there's no punctuation at the end of the line. If you look at the words decay and bear, there's no punctuation at the end of that. So around the decay of that colossal wreck, it kind of pushes on. And that pushing on with greater pace, for me, emphasizes the amount of space around the statue. There used to be a huge city there with thousands and thousands of slaves all doing what he said, but now there's just nothing, just level sand and emptiness. And that word wreck is interesting. They've capitalized it. It's the same letter as in works. That works has become a wreck, emphasizing that scale of fall from his power. It's only 2 lines away. And now everything is boundless and bare, so it's like he's in the middle of the desert. There's nothing there. It's just there's no sort of end of the town or anything. It just goes on forever, and that power has now vanished. There's no memory of it. And finally, you get a bit of alliteration, which is often quite difficult to write about, but I thought I'd have a go at it here. They repeat that letter B, boundless and bare, a plosive consonant, which gives it a bit of anger almost. And then the lone and level sands, which again shows the kind of calmness now in this place without Ozymandias. So that contrast between the sort of anger, boundless and bare, and the kind of calmness in this place, the lone level sands. So again, pause the video if you need to get this down. If not, keep watching. So the last thing we're going to do here, I appreciate that was a fairly swift look through the poem Ozymandias, but every time you look through a poem, it's really, really important to create a decent revision resource, because it might be that you look at this poem now, but then actually you don't look at it again for a few months, which would be very poor practice. Keep looking back at these things. But if for whatever reason you haven't looked at it for a while, all the analysis, all the important stuff will have fallen out of your head. So what I recommend you do is just pick 3 quotations or poetic features to memorize. You can do this, again, a lot of people have had plenty of success with these cue cards, revision cards, whatever you want to call them, which are really handy. You can do this on a sheet of paper. There's various options I'm going to give you here. So you could just circle them in a different color in your anthology. Say you've got a green highlighter that you've not used for anything else. That green highlighter could be, here's the 3 quotations I'm definitely going to know, and I can just test myself on. And once I've got those 3 quotations, which might be the 3 from the start, up to you, that'll unlock the rest of the knowledge in my head. Or you could put them onto a revision card, like in the picture there. And a really good bit of practice, if you're going to do the revision card approach, is on one side have the information you want to learn, on the other side have a clue. Could just be like a little picture you've drawn or something. So if you're doing, my name is Ozymandias, King of Kings, you could draw like a crown on there or something, or 2 crowns to represent King of Kings. And you look at the 2 crowns and think, what is that? Oh yeah, Ozymandias, King of Kings. And you can test yourself with it, which is really handy. Or failing that, have like a little small revision book, like one of those sort of small spellings books that you tend to get in schools, which again just makes it less intimidating than just looking at all the poems with all the annotations. Because again, lots of pupils will look at videos like this, annotate the hell out of their work so it's covered in their pen, and then when they go back to revise, they can't make head or tail of it. So distill the important information. Last thing you need to do is just pick 3 quotations to memorize, and have a good day.